the state of the nation is, there has to be an insecurity almost. We need to declare an emergency when it comes to security in Nigeria, and they give a detail of some of the things that they will do. Only yesterday, we are talking about the fact that the president of the Senate had spoken, that Ahmed Lawan, said that the Senate will support the executive in restoring security sanity to Nigeria. Please take us to this story from the Punch newspaper.
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to start by saying, isn't it nice that the National Assembly are just returning from a 5 weeks holiday? So much enjoyment, and life is so rosy. But that's a story for another day, and that's another matter on its own.
They just break.
We're talking about insecurity now, and of course, we know insecurity has been at the front burner of the discussion since the emergence of the regional security outfits that has been set up. And of course, if we also know that insecurity has been one of those issues that has been a major issue for Nigeria for quite a while now, and we've been hearing this conversation of how the government needs to act appropriately and nip this in the bud. Now the National Assembly is coming up now, um, due to the recent killings that we've seen in Plateau State, especially, and of course when we go back to talking about the member of the Christian Association of Nigeria that was also the pastor that was also killed in Adamawa too.
Chairman.
The chairman.
Chairman, yeah, the regional chairman, who was killed in Adamawa then. And so when we look at all this, it's pointing towards one direction, that of course the insecurity challenges are not abating. It seems like it's getting worse, and it's very gladdening to see that the National Assembly is picking up, both in the lower chamber and those in the upper chamber too,
chamber,
and then they're speaking up and against it and saying that the security challenges that we face in Nigeria, beyond the belief of those in the executives. I mean, Femi Adesina did release a statement that on Sunday, saying that the insecurity challenges that we're facing is not as bad as we've had in the past. I mean, one thing that I would like to see is the statistics.
Yeah.
How many lives have been lost now? Because it stated that over the last 3 months now, the situation has gotten worse. Of course, we have seen a renewed emergence of the Boko Haram now. We've seen them attack quite a few targets of recent
In the northeast.
in the northeast. We've seen a lot of insecurity just generally across the country. So what the National Assembly are now saying is that they need to start visiting this conversation of the community policing, which is something that we have been talking about extensively for quite a while now.
We are aware. National Assembly is talking about it.
Yes.
What significant difference will that make?
Well, we're hoping that they're now going to start calling in a lot of the executives and those that are involved in the security parastatals of our country. I mean, they've talked about inviting the IG of the police for a closed door session, and we're hoping that out of that they're going to be able to formulate laws and policies that would guide against this. But I do not want to speak from that perspective of going backwards and looking at how many times that the IG of police has met up with the National Assembly, and yet we still haven't seen any improvement in the security architecture. I'm trying to be positive here that this National Assembly means well, and they're going to work in collaboration with the executives to ensure that they do act appropriately on this matter.
That's the rubber stamp Senate that has been sleeping.
Thank you.
Remember, if they had done their job, we wouldn't have had the issue of Amotekun. If they had legislated what was required to ensure that states, this discussion on state policing, it rests with the National Assembly. They've been sleeping. Now they wake up after a holiday and expect us to now just start to rally around them. No.
All right. Thank you very much. We look forward to what the conclusion of this matter is. We don't want to talk alone. We want action, and we'll definitely keep our eye on this. Move on to our next story, Uti. Don't be afraid of audit if you are clean, Buhari tells public officers. Now, he made this assertion at the Auditors General Conference, second edition of Conference of Auditors General in Nigeria in Abuja yesterday. He was speaking to the number of auditors in the country, across the country. Please take us through what he said and how he's mentioned that if your hands are clean, we should have audits, particularly at state level. Governments, we don't seem to see that. Please take us through the story, Uti.
Okay, so I mean, this is really Buhari calling. I apologize for my voice. I sound a little quirky. But yeah, he's calling on the Auditor General's, basically just espousing the value of auditing
Yes.
and what it can actually do, and really stating that as Auditor Generals, the ability to really manage all the excesses that we know about that we have in Nigeria, corruption, and for me, it was. He's called out a couple of things, or he's also mentioned a couple of agencies like EFCC and ICPC and the fantastic things that they're doing. But I would have liked to see him also talk about some of the benefits that have come out from the different audits. So he talks about how all the MDAs should be audited, and he refers to the annual reports of the 2016-2017 audits. For us to start to see value from organizations like, well, from the Office of the Auditor General and from audits like this, we need to be able to see regular reports. We need to be able to see what is actually being done. Because when you talk about people like EFCC and prosecuting governors, all this loot that's been found, what's been done with it? Again, there's still huge loopholes that haven't been closed. So there's still a lot more work to be done. But even with these organizations and these MDAs, what kind of, apart from financial audits, because we all have horror stories when we go to ministries to try and get anything done, what processes? I mean, an audit in general is not supposed to just audit you financially, audits your processes, are you doing things in the right way? So apart from the financial bits, because that's only going to tell us what we already know, we're corrupt, there are loopholes. But even in our processes, I know that a lot of state governments have done a lot of work. Lagos State is one I can speak to, have done a lot of work in terms of the kind of processes they have in place when you need to get something done in Lagos State. They've really done a good job there. So they need to be auditing other things so that it's a really holistic benefit to the process.
Thank you. Now he talks about, there's one aspect where he talks about just how independent audits in auditor generals are, particularly in state and MDAs, like you mentioned. A statement I'd like to read, it says, has any annual financial statement produced by any of the states received anything other than a clean audit opinion as far back as you can remember? And this is very important because the purpose of an audit is to ensure that things are done properly and it's as transparent as possible. So processes are followed. Are we saying that processes have been followed to the letter as far back as we can remember? So how can we get a real report?
And that's exactly what I'm saying. So if you have an audit, what comes with an audit? It comes with recommendations.
Yes.
And you go and implement those recommendations so that by the next time you're audited, those same things don't come up.
Yes.
But essentially, that's what this is saying. They will keep coming up because nothing's being done.
All right. Thank you very much.
We have messages. Awole from Lekki says, how many 5 or 6 week recesses do these guys get in a year? This shows how detached they are from reality. They've just realized that the state of insecurity has reached a worsening stage. Now, well done, he said. And Prince from Ajawa Estate in Lagos says, please kindly tell the National Assembly to buckle up or just be a rubber stamp house and do the needful about the insecurity before it degenerates. Thank you very much, Prince, for your message. And Tara from Yaba says, these legislators do not joke with their break. Not even security issues can disturb it. And when they return from the break, camera will catch some of them napping. This is really serious. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments. Keep them coming through. Twitter, YouTube is open, so please send your messages to those platforms as well. We'll come to you, Devoe, for the next one. This news story is from the Daily Times of Nigeria. And we have here that the National Orientation Agency and the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, are to partner to scrutinize the execution of constituency projects. It's good that we have eyes on the National Assembly at the moment. And talking about them, one thing that has come up again and again in recent times is constituency projects. Please take us through this story and how they hope to partner to work to ensure that constituency projects are transparent and are really being executed.
Well, it's still on the President's anti-corruption campaign and the issues of accountability. Now, the ICPC, as we know, has been looking at constituency projects for some time now, and they have partnered with the National Orientation Agency. While they're doing that is because they want the National Orientation Agency to beef up their campaign to citizens, to be able to participate in identifying, monitoring, tracking constituency projects, obviously, which are meant for each and every one of us, right? Now, where is the issue? They have stated that there has been a lot of corruption as regards the constituency projects. What are constituency projects? Constituency projects it's an aberration in our law, whereby each representative gets or fights or lobbies to get some money, some funding for social projects that are meant to take place within his or her constituency, right?
Yes.
Now, for some time now, there has been a fit or a fight between the executive and the legislature year after year when it comes to the budget as to what should go to constituency budget. And the issue is, should that be at the prerogative of the executive who have the mandate, or the legislator who represent their people? Now, while this was going on, the political solution was for the governors, sorry, not the governors, the executive,
Yeah.
to, in a way, allow the legislator to have constituency projects. If you remember, they kept on going back and forth.
Yes.
Oh, you've reduced my portion. Buhari said, no, if I'm giving you that, that reduces the amount. That ongoing battle has gone on. Now, that's on one end. The other end of it was fine. You've made such a fuss about constituency projects. What are you doing? But it was found out that many of them had been conniving with their state governments and ministries to ensure that some of these projects don't come to life. And they've discovered in many cases that for whatever they claim that they were using it for, sometimes they find them stored away, or they don't find the items ever bought. Now, that's why the NOA and the ICPC have come together. But what I would say is this: whilst that is government talking, the real job lies with citizens. I would ask everyone listening to check up Budget.
Yeah.
The website Budget has a tool called Tracker. Tracker tracks both the budget and the constituency projects for each local government, state government, as well as the federal government. You need to know the constituency budgets that these legislators have claimed for your well-being and ensure that it is delivered. Because as of the last report, over, I think, 1,500 projects were abandoned or not even done. So the truth is, we can't rely on the NOA and the ICPC. We have to ensure that the money that they have claimed on our behalf is used for us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I like the fact that you've drawn attention to our own role in all of this and our responsibility as citizens to hold our representatives to account. Oftentimes, we keep pointing fingers saying you're not doing any work, yet we have the power to check them and actually ask them questions. Wouldn't it be fantastic if during elections we ask them during the hostings that, what have you done?
Even before then,
because
the money is allocated right when they start.
Brilliant.
And,
Thank you.
Here's what's higher from the other side. Please, Lagos is on this table. Lump sum budgets is a budget needing audit explanation. And Chikagina reacts to the security issue. Thank you very much for your messages. Please keep them coming on Twitter as well with the hashtag FreshlyPress981.
Move on to the next story here from the Guardian newspaper. Senate to expunge death penalty from hate speech bill. So proponent of the anti-hate speech bill before the National Assembly, Aliyu Sabi Abdullahi, yesterday disclosed that there are plans to tinker with the bill, saying the death penalty will be expunged. So when the hate speech bill was presented before Senate last year, even though it passed second reading in 2 weeks, a number of people reacted to this. One of the most controversial parts of this bill is the death penalty, particularly when the hate remark that is made leads to the death of the intended, of the person. So please take us through this story and if this will help it be accepted by people.
So, I mean, first of all, the story hasn't really said much because, like you rightly said, he says we plan to tinker with the bill, saying the death penalty will be expunged, and that part of the bill could be removed due to the strong resistance that it has received. Now, for me, this hate speech bill, I don't even think that it's required. Nigeria is a very diverse country. Our diversity shouldn't be our weakness. It should be our strength. And we are, over time, this diversity has led to bias. It's led to all the insecurity challenges that we're seeing right now. I don't see that this bill is going to do anything to actually solve that problem. We need to go back to our culture. We need to go back to the roots and really try to find a way to start to educate ourselves on what our diversity is for us as a strength. So, I mean, it's great to see that. I thought that the death penalty was completely out of place in this bill, given that we already have a right to free speech, which the Constitution guarantees. And the fact that, I mean, this again, you can't talk about the hate speech bill without talking about the social media bill, and the idea is that both of these things, the general public sees it as a way for government trying to curb free speech. I should have the right to say whatever. I mean, it shouldn't lead to, and again, in our Cybercrimes Act, it covers that aspect of the digital space. So really, this bill doesn't do anything but shine a spotlight on the divide that we should be working to try to close. So great to see that, the death penalty is coming off the table, but I think it highlights so many other key issues that our legislators need to be looking at rather than, focusing solely on
Quick
hate speech.
question. Now that it's been expunged, would you be more open to exploring having a hate speech? Because, of course,
Never.
Nigeria is not the only country. Singapore has one. We have other African countries who have something similar around the hate speech bill.
I wouldn't, because again, those countries that you've mentioned, what's their level of literacy? What's their level of, there's so many factors. I could say something that could then be interpreted as hate speech. And because of my level of education and my understanding, I probably was trying to say something else. So I can't agree with it. I think we're far way off from it. We have bigger issues that we need to try and deal with before we get to this point. But this is not our core issue right now.
Thank you. So don't just expunge the death penalty, expunge it all.
That's right.
Thank you.
Speaking about core issues, one of the core issues in Nigeria is security, and it seemed like the military, in their statements, body language, seem to be indicating that they are recording some level of victory. But from this story, Devoe, the army reopens Maiduguri Damboa Road, assures commuters of safety. That's from the Daily Times. The state deputy governor, Haji Usman Kandafo, was addressing the army and lauded the chief of army staff over his commitment to end insurgency, saying, he's been very instrumental to restoring peace in the state and other parts of the country. But what are your thoughts regarding the story?
Well, the truth is, there's not much of a story here because it's just a major artery within Maiduguri. That's the Damboa Maiduguri Road, which extends from Maiduguri when you're going outside to other aspects, and then it was open all the way to Biu. Now, this was closed early in 2019 because the army used that major road as an artery for their movement, and also to ensure that whenever there was a distress call, they could arrive at the locations. If you do remember, many of the attacks in the Northeast have taken place in the remote villages.
Yes.
So that's why this road was more or less restricted for security movement. However, they've been able to open it back again, and they've asked commercial and private commuters to feel free. But you see, I can also call this action as sound bites. For some time now, if you remember, in the heat of the Boko Haram, we heard a lot of sound bites. What we just heard was after we hear an attack, we then hear a condemnation, and then nothing happens. Another attack the next Sunday, a condemnation. Now, again, we're saying that we have technically defeated, the new word was we have degraded, but we do know that despite this opening, many other attacks have taken place in and around Maiduguri. And I would beg the army to begin to manage information properly. We need to have a direct idea of what is going on. That even gives us hope to know that, okay, I'm working with an army that I can be confident in. But this whitewashing of the insurgency that is taking place, and with newspapers, if you saw in the front headline, president is expressing shock. If he was receiving intelligence daily, how can he be shocked today about what is going on?
Yes, I understand your sentiments, and I share a similar sentiment in the sense, even if I won't admit it live on radio. But you also know that beyond just the fights with arms on the, how it is done,
right?
There's still also the fight on intelligence in terms of information gathering and the kind of information that the army disseminates to the public.
Yes.
We have a level of, I wouldn't say assimilation, the way we would understand the information is limited compared to how the military treats such sensitive information. And you would not ignore the fact that even the enemy uses such information to their benefit. So however the information is skewed, either falls to favor the military or Boko Haram. But I mean, it's okay for us to complain that the military is not giving us enough information, but how much information can we handle? And how much can harm or help the country?
Well, the truth, I think when it comes to the livelihoods of Nigerians, the government needs to be forthright. We need to know so that we know how much concern to give. Remember, let me use health as a scenario, or let's even go back to security. In the heat of Boko Haram, what happened? Many of the tribes and religions came together to protect themselves, because at that time, we didn't know what was going on, and people were just dying left, right, and center. That still is required till date. For them to trust, they commended the civilian JTF. Remember, that's voluntary,
Joint
yes, of citizens joining the army in one way or the other to fight them, and they have helped them because there are areas that the army is not there. Remember, in the new strategy, they moved away from some certain villages, which many of them have been crying foul. They're going to need a stronger intelligence to ensure that they can keep tabs on those areas, to ensure that somehow, some way, even if the Boko Haram in their asymmetric warfare, which is, like I said in the beginning, the protection of soft targets, they don't have to face the army in most places. They just look for soft targets where they know that even if there's a distress call, it will take an hour or two for the army to arrive.
But of course, yes. I mean, that's perfect, which means they now took a back seat and allowed the police to come in, right? But in recent news, we've also learned that the police is very averse to going into the forests.
Are they equipped?
Right?
Are they trained?
Which now lends credence to the arguments for regional policing.
security.
Bam. Not even Amotekun, community policing, proper policing in those areas. We have citizens, employ them, train them, get them working.
Demola Adeshino on Twitter says the federal government is fighting corruption, they're only making rhetorics, just like security is getting worse despite their sound bites. Corruption is systematic and solution is in audits, budget processes, and financial procedures. No sacred cows. And then on YouTube, Nizel FM says, we, that's regular Nigerians, are the ones that make this constituency project an issue. If we stop voting for reps based on sewing machines and boreholes, what will be the excuse for the money?
All right. The federal government bemoans the non-utilization of railway for cargo evacuation. It's a story, a headline from this day newspaper. Here, the story essentially covers, we know the Minister of Transportation, Mr. Rotimi Amechi, given deadlines and, often gives updates as to the progress of that construction work. But in this statement, they're expressing, the federal government, that is, expressed dissatisfaction with the non-utilization of the railway transport system for the movement of cargo. Do you think this railway system is well equipped to, carry this sort of service?
Well, I mean, that's a question that the Honorable Minister needs to answer to. I mean, he hasn't actually said that. But, I mean, I just wanted to go to the statement that he's made. And he made this statement at a Nigerian 2020 Economic Outlook that was organized by Deloitte. He's actually he's talking about the railway project that has been completed. And he's mentioned the Itakwe Warri rail line, which is now completed according to the Honorable Minister. He also mentioned the Lagos Ibadan rail line, talked about the Abuja Kaduna one, which we know that is already completed. But the comments that he's making at present now is that the Itakwe Warri rail line is ready, but unfortunately there's no patronage coming from Nigerians. And as such, is making the statement that if there's no patronage, it will be difficult for government to recoup the money that they've invested in the project. And as such, this will be one of those projects that will be derelict and would not be of use. Well, I mean, it's an interesting statement, and it's a fair statement to make. But the question that one should be asking is that when they were thinking of working on this project, we should be looking at the viability of this project, and is what Itakwe to Kogi, what sort of business transactions goes on within that route? Is that a profitable route? Because this is one of the challenges that we have when we're talking about projects that this government is embarking on. Of course, let me highlight that we've spent huge trillions of naira on infrastructure projects, and we're currently we currently stand at about 25 trillion naira in debt now, and a lot of questions has been raised about the projects that we're working on in Nigeria. How viable are they, and are Nigerians seeing the benefits of such projects? I think this is just a typical or a classic example of such project. When we are executing projects, it's important for us to carry out or conduct our feasibility studies to see how viable these projects are before we go into it. Absolutely. And this is just a classic example of such cases. I mean, we should have focused on other projects that would have been more viable. The Lagos Ibadan one, we know how commercially viable that would have been. Why did we not focus on that? But the other comment that I also wanted to make as well, that the minister mentioned, I'll quote him. He said the problem Nigeria has is both the leadership and the followership, but more of the followership. So I mean, invariably, it's pointing fingers at the people.
Yeah, but who would you rather follow? Somebody that's leading by example, or somebody who just tells you what to do?
Well, you know.
Well, it depends on the example that they're actually leading by.
Okay, well, thank you very much. The viability is a very good argument, really. Okay, let's look at more stories now. The Punch newspaper reports gun-wielding custom officer stops power disconnection. The Abuja Electricity Distribution Company lamented yesterday, also highlighting some of the major, security issues they're having directed to their staff. This man loaded a pistol and just held them at gunpoint and said, "Reconnect my lights. If not, I'll shoot you." But what are your thoughts regarding this scenario?
Oh my goodness. When I saw this story, how many times have we talked about all sorts of different uniformed officials carrying arms, and you don't understand why they're carrying arms, why they have these arms? And when I saw this, I said, a custom official, first of all, has arms. Why does he have the arms in his residence? Why can't it be left at wherever his office or his job is at? But this story says basically they came to disconnect his power, and he wasn't having any of it, and he used his arms to force them to reconnect his power with an outstanding debt of 227,000. Now, when I see stories like this, I always like to go to, rather than focus on the story, let's talk about the root cause.
Yes.
Now, so many times we hear, and the story itself even speaks to other staff of the discos who have been attacked, all on the basis of trying to disconnect power and trying to collect. So they're going out for their revenue generation drives, and they're being met with hostility. Is anyone surprised by this? Because when you're not getting value, or you believe you're not getting value for your money, you will be hostile. Now, the actions of this particular official is completely and utterly unacceptable. I think that they're saying that the police is still trying to apprehend him. For the fact that they know who he is and they're able to validate this, I would like to see some swift action, because the staff of these kind of agencies who are allowed to bear arms need to understand very quickly that these kind of actions will not be accepted. He should by now, you know who he is, you know who he's employed by, please fire him first of all. And then we can start to see that people see that there are definite consequences for our actions. So the fact that the police is still trying to apprehend him, that's a criminal matter. But you receive these arms as a tool for your job. If you've abused it, then you should lose that job. So that's one instance on that side. And then on the electricity side, what are we really doing about this electricity problem and the disco problem? We're supposed to have meters going out to people. If I have my meter, when there's no power, I don't pay. If I keep getting an estimated bill, because I try to think to myself, how long has he had to accrue an outstanding debt of 227,000 naira? If he had a prepaid meter, he would never have that kind of bill. So the discos themselves need to own up to the fact that they need to be able to, the entire electricity sector, the power sector has issues, but everybody needs to own their own part in it. So yep.
Establishing key points. You have established very key points. First of all, criminal charges should be filed against him. He should be held to
he should
account.
lose his job. He should be held to account. Absolutely.
And then on the part of the distribution
Discos,
company, they should provide power. You remember though, was it just last week that there was a shutdown? The national grid collapsed.
Yeah, for the
Twice in
15th
2
time.
Oh, well, last week alone, twice in 2 hours. So that alone will get a lot.
It's
of
on its
people
way out.
upset.
Everybody should prepare. Because it's happening more current now.
Messenger of doom, please.
Emeka agrees with you. Well, in terms of speaking alongside what you said, he said if he had a prepaid meter, will he shoot it? And then Chris is saying Itakpe to Warri rail line was initiated to link Ajaokuta Steel Complex to the Warri port. Both are barely functional now. So how do you want the railway to be used? We have a government that barely thinks, according to what he said. And then we have from Leo, who says customs officer and PATN officer. What an irony. I laugh in Spanish.
And Yinka says when they're shouting Warri Takwe rail line, one would wonder if there's an urgent need for that line with clamor from the people until this. Is this how our pension money will enter voice practice?
Hopefully not, Yinka. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your comments, and thank you especially to our analysts for today. Thank you, Uti. Uti is at iamsyvanti on Twitter. Thank you, Devoe Okorie. Devoe is at Devoe Okorie on Twitter, and of course, a big thanks to you too, Gbolahan at Mr. G Quest on Twitter. Stay tuned as into the world of sports. Tega Tiger will be here at 8:15 in the locker room 981. And don't forget we get banter as well. This is Smooth 98.1.
I was looking at you as you're turning that off, so I was like,